And let's move on to the 6B, which is the 8-mark question. With reference to figure 2, so using figure 2, examine 2 possible factors which may have influenced demand for rail travel since 2008. And always be very aware of what date they give you. It's just popped into my mind right now. 2008 is, of course, a very interesting time in the UK and just global economies. So that should give you a bit of ideas of how to navigate this question. Since they haven't just given you a random date there, they've specifically told you about 2008, which, of course, is after the financial crisis. And what was the main thing that happened during the financial crisis? Of course, lots of bubbles burst and essentially lots of people lost their jobs. Therefore, if we're thinking about rail demand and things like cars, things like just transport, like having a car, they substitutes so having a car is a substitute to travelling on a train or travelling on public transport, for example. So therefore, if we think about financial crisis, lots of people lose their jobs. What's more expensive? Having a car, a personal car, is probably more expensive than travelling on public transport. Therefore, one possible factor I can think of just by using the hints they've almost given me in the question is that due to drops in income, due to lower income, individuals have substituted away from owning a car personally to now taking a cheaper substitute, which is public transport, which of course is railways. And let's have a look at figure 2 and see what it actually mentions. I am actually going to scan through the extracts where specifically the titles to see if it gives any hints with regards to anything else. So it doesn't look like it, but figure 2, what does it show? So since 2008, which I'm guessing is this point here, we have seen, so an increase in the passenger kilometres in billions of rail travel over the years. So we scan through the extracts, as it is with lots of 8-mark questions. It's kind of hit and miss. Sometimes you get a few hints in the extract, sometimes you don't. So let's just talk about the factors we discussed. So one of them, of course, was a reduction in incomes. So I'm just going to use this as a start, essentially. 65 billion in 2018. So just include my application. So reduction incomes, increased rail demand. So I've just said in 65 billion, obviously passenger kilometres in 2018 compared to only 51 in 2008. And essentially, how am I going to word this? So I'm going to say how basically in the financial crisis in the UK, after 2008, we saw around a 5% increase in unemployment. And of course, if there's an increase in unemployment, it means less people have jobs. If less people have jobs, it means that incomes decrease, things like disposable incomes decrease. Therefore, individuals, if they have less money, they look to find cheaper substitutes. So you could say individuals decrease their demand for the normal good, which is cars, and they increase their demand for the inferior good, which is things like public transport. So I've pretty much just written that point up, that reduction in incomes, individuals substitute away from the more expensive, like cars, to therefore demanding public transport such as railways. But another thing you could mention in this point is, of course, in the first question, we were talking about how the government is subsidising railways. And of course, another byproduct of subsidising is that prices decrease from PE to P1. Therefore, as more people have lost their jobs, but now trains are cheaper, therefore it increases the demand for trains. As like I said, lower incomes, people go for goods that are cheaper. And now, of course, with your 8-mark questions, you will be having 2 evaluation marks. And with evaluation marks, I think a really good one to discuss is XCD, the cross elasticity of demand. So we would, of course, say that cars and public transport are quite close substitutes. However, you could evaluate that saying it depends on the degree to which cars and public transport are close substitutes, as there's many factors that affect that, such as geography. As for example, in somewhere like the north, if some of you know about the north, of course, it's a lot less clustered than the south. So for example, cars and public transport are closer substitutes. But then we're somewhere in the south, like London, since it's quite hard to get around on a car, compared to like railways such as the underground, you could say cars and public transport are less effective substitutes, since of course the same time it might take you on the tube is much longer on a car, and it's much less convenient, for example, on a car. So you could 100%, one evaluation point could be the degree to which, and you could mention XCD in this, the degree to which cars and public transport are close substitutes. Now with regards to the second factor, the first thing that comes to my mind, and a valid one, of course, since 2008, there has probably been, and there is, an increase in population. Now, it does not look like the most developed point, but remember, one little thing is for examining questions, the 2 marks are always allocated evenly. So there's always 2, 2, 2, 2. So 2 K, 2A, 2 analysis, and 2 evaluation. So, and here it specifically says 2 points. So that means As long as you're including application, you're including analysis, not much is needed of each as they're all allocated evenly. But yeah, so increased population, how can we link this to the economic side of things? So I'm going to include a bit of applications. The UK population has gone up about 6%, which of course you have about 70 million people, which is around 3.9 million increase in last 10 years. And of course this is extreme, it sounds really simple, but this will therefore, more people means more people, and to make this a bit less simple, I probably would throw in a demand curve here, price, quantity. So increased number of people would of course increase the demand for trains, that will shifting demand curve out, increasing the quantity demanded of trains from Q1 to Q2. More demand, probably just add a bit of diagrammatic analysis, E dot G from D to D plus 1, thus increasing quantity demanded of trains. Now, how could I evaluate this? I could literally use the diagram again, saying how of an evaluation, where there's an increase in demand, there's also an increase in prices, and I'm pretty sure the extract also refers to it, where the prices of train tickets are increasing. Well, you would expect prices have increased in the last 10 years, thus meaning it may negate or it may decrease the degree to which the demand for trains is actually increasing due to the increased price of train fares. And then of course really small things like in COVID, what happened? Lots of people started working from home, and therefore when people work from home, people work remotely, they no longer need to trek it out, they don't need to travel to work, therefore it could reduce the demand for trains. So lots of different evaluation points there. Very simple question, but a slightly difficult one because very vague, you could say, and not much economics in it. But like I said, practice these questions, practice the vague questions, practice the non-vague questions, practice everything, and it should allow you to score those top marks. But yeah, but one of the reasons why I do these paper videos is also to show you that some questions are harder than others. If you're finding question hard, it's very likely that most other people will find it difficult, and it's not just you. So guys, keep hopeful. But yeah, let's keep going and let's move on to the next question.